And I will share Chrome. There we go. And I'm going to move things around a little bit. There we go. Okay, welcome everyone to the April 29th, 2025 iteration of the MicroProfile Live Hangout. A link to the meeting minutes is in the chat. Thanks, Jan. Please click on the link and add your name as a attendee and optionally your organization. It is everyone's shared responsibility to take notes, and this meeting is being recorded and will be pushed to YouTube eventually. So, okay, I think for today's topics, there are three primary items. First is talk a little bit about the tutorial. Obviously, talk about the MicroProfile proposal hosting in Jakarta. And the last one is the MicroProfile 7.1 release, which I think we'll take first. And then we'll get into the proposal. And so, Emily, do you want to lead the release section?
Yeah, fine. So as you all know, basically is Eclipse Foundation having some issues with the CI, also a lot of the website maintenance and etc. So the Jenkins build is pretty much you cannot do any release, cannot at all. So it's still down at the moment. So it's I think you all the committers from Eclipse Foundation should have received the email, and also I basically reposted on the MicroProfile.io Google group as well. So you probably you got in multiple places already. So with that, basically is a prevent from the further update kind of on the MicroProfile telemetry. So it's a kind of the we have to watch when the infrastructure from Eclipse Foundation will be fixed. Hopefully very soon. I know they have been working actively on this, trying to fix the issue. So with that, probably it will be delayed, but for how many days, that's all depend on how soon the problem will be fixed. So the plan is to, with the last conversation at a technical call, so we'll use Open Liberty for the rectification. So that's kind of, it's pretty much we had basically the is a local build and etc. It can pass all the TTKs, but now we just need to stage out to push a new stage out a new release. So that's pretty much.
So all the prereqs we have done. So we've got the candidate release for all the specs.
Yeah.
Okay, so this Quark is CCR. Is going to switch to Open Liberty.
Yeah.
CCR. The ballot then will start as soon as we can get our builds reviewed. Okay, and then we can also do the email
Yes.
release. Okay, or email
Yeah.
release review. Okay.
Yeah. Once we get Jenkins build back to live, and then we will fix new dates because now is
Okay.
pretty much unknown.
Okay. So I'm going to go in here and just say delayed due to Jenkins. So I'm going to just copy that for now. Okay. This must be a pretty major issue for it to be down for a while.
Yeah,
So,
it's been off for I think more than 5 or 6 days.
right. So,
Yes, it is a massive issue.
okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to just get into the issues here. It's just one thing hits my mind. It's always security, man. It's always security. That's how I look at
Yeah.
it. But yeah, we could either offline or just not even discuss it, that's fine. I'm sure you guys are working on it as hard as you can. Okay. All right, so that's it for that. So we're kind of in limbo right now on the release, and I don't think it really hurts us at all. Um, One of the questions, Tabang, is going to be around voting in the ballot procedure because a lot of us from Red Hat, starting July 1st, will be a part of IBM. So I'm not sure what that means for me for the rest of the calendar year because Red Hat, you know, we're good through the end of the year on our membership fees. What that means in terms of voting and such. So we could talk about it offline, but that might be a forcing function for us trying to release before at least July 1st, which I think we'll do because I don't think we're going to slip 2 months. But okay, the second topic is the proposal. So Emily started a proposal doc, so you can go ahead and click on it here. So we're keeping track of the discussion here on a date by date kind of basis, meeting by meeting basis. So that brings up this doc. Where we're trying to capture all of the issues, and this is where I'm struggling a little bit with. Well, both of us are. Emily and I worked on ballot verbiage. And there's an approach. So first of all, we try and capture, I think, the issues, right? The second is if we're trying, when we create verbiage, right? There's like a single paragraph where we try to list things. Um, the second approach is we have a bit of an introduction and we have some bulleted things. The problem is it's good and it's bad. The more detail we get into in the ballot, the harder it becomes to pass. And it is what it is. I'm not even saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just it is what it is because we do have to resolve some things. So, for example, um, I don't think independent release cycles is an issue. Um, I don't think committers being a committer on all projects, existing MicroProfile committers being committers on all projects when they move over is really a sticking issue. I'm not even sure config is an issue. Um, you know, with it maybe being put into a different profile or something like that. I think the big one is namespace. Does it remain or change to Jakarta dot? Another one could be the branding. So um, the naming convention is um, profile name space profile in Jakarta, but in MicroProfile, it's camel cased all as one word, right? So far, those seem to be the more contentious issues. Maybe the spec naming could be a contentious issue. I'm not sure there. Um, Jakarta MicroProfile health, right? Is that a big deal? You know, I don't think so. But these are things that I want to figure out how to deal with this. I don't want to wait necessarily until after we do a ballot. And I do see your hand raised. To have how do I say this? Um, I don't want to wait until after a ballot and then we figure it out. I want to have we all have some sense of we know what's going to happen, although we may agree or disagree. Um, and a procedural question for Tabang, it's like, well, as part of the ballot, could somebody say, I vote +1 contingent upon, right? And if you say contingent upon, a Jakarta vote with them maybe having a different, you know, alternative set of details, conflicting, how does that work or does it even work? So, Reza, go ahead first.
So, John, from a Microsoft perspective, honestly, we want to make a good faith vote here, whatever we ultimately vote on. What I can tell you is we will vote exactly the same way as we would, in the Jakarta working group as it is here. And honestly, our perspective would be the same, right? Because ultimately we are one company. It's just one Microsoft. It doesn't really
Mhm.
matter if we're working in Jakarta or working on my MicroProfile. We just have a single perspective. So I'm trying to read this, and I'm going to spend more time reading this. Am I understanding it correctly that you would be okay if we made the collective decision later on that in fact the namespace does change to, let's say, something like Jakarta.microprofile or perhaps even Jakarta.star altogether, but you're okay with that as long as the name of the profile is called MicroProfile and the brand is retained somehow. Now, personally, I think that's a very confusing outcome, but I'm just trying to read this text and trying to understand whether that's an okay scenario for you then.
Well, the Red Hat perspective is that the namespace remains the same because we'd just be breaking things again. And I know the alternative view is, well, we've done it once. We could do it again and, bring consistency. I understand that perspective. Um, there's just disagreements about what's the best approach, right? And they're all in good faith, to your point. But there's disagreements, which is why the more detail I think about putting in the ballot, the more challenging it becomes for the ballot to pass. So that's where I'm trying to figure this out, and Taban could probably help out with this as well because he's got a lot of experience with working groups across the the Eclipse sphere, Eclipse Foundation sphere. So Taban, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in order of the questions raised, the there is no notion of contingency in resolutions. So
Okay.
you can't say it's +1 conditioned on et cetera, right? So it's
Okay.
you have to craft the resolution, and I think this is as good a process as any to get community input and alignment in advance. But you craft the resolution so that it stands on its own. So that's
Right.
the atomicity I was talking about before, right? So it's got to really be standalone. I think that's one thing. And then I just do want to remind everyone that this is a MicroProfile resolution, by which I mean we just need to be very clear that nothing that is approved and adopted on the MicroProfile side is binding to Jakarta. So when you have the level of detail that you have, if you can flip back, John,
Oh yeah, yeah.
around this is going to happen on the Jakarta side, that's going to happen. That's really not the, let's say, province of the MicroProfile working group to determine. You can state the intention and we agree, and outside of the resolution you would say that this is what we want to happen and we can coalesce on that preferred outcome, but at some point the Jakarta folks are going to have their say, right? And this is the idea that there would be a mirroring resolution on the Jakarta side.
So what if the resolutions are? I'm trying to think about this. Conflicting. And Riz, I do see your hand. So for example, bring up the hyper issue about namespace, right? So let's say we have a perspective about namespace in MicroProfile and our ballot passes. And then Jakarta says we agree to consume MicroProfile, but the namespace is going to be something different. What happens at that point? Because both ballots pass, but they may have inherently different outcomes.
But
What
it's
happens?
exactly what I said before, John, which is that you don't MicroProfile. It's like any working group, one working group does not get to tell another working group how to operate.
Right. So we're
But
going to have agreements ahead, understandings ahead of time about what's going to happen, I think. So there's sorry, Reza and then Emily. Sorry, Reza, go ahead.
John, my feedback and suggestion on the text that I see in front of me right now, and I'm happy to, as I said, I'll also carefully review this later and give written feedback. But my suggestion is that actually the bullet form is better. If we are indeed getting into like a resolution that tries to make a very concrete proposal down to the level of what is the name of the profile, this is what the name of the projects are going to be, this is what's going to happen with the committers, this is what we're proposing the namespace should be, all of that should actually be spelled out. So the thing that's prominently missing for me right now is basically there is an assumption that we're actually keeping the namespace exactly the same, and that should be basically clearly spelled out, right? So there's no ambiguity as to what we are voting on, whatever it may be, right? Yeah, so that would be my feedback here. Is right now it's unclear, right? Immediately when I'm reading this, it's like that raises a question for me. Okay, so are we saying we're okay with the namespace change, but not okay with the profile name change, or okay or not okay with the spec name change? It's too much ambiguity for me at the moment, right? I wouldn't be able to vote on it. If this was presented as is, I'd raise these same questions. It's like, okay, so what does this mean? What am I actually voting on? What is this actually saying?
And that's why, to be honest, I left it out to have this discussion. And it's not that it was, forgotten, because it. I kind of wanted to have the discussion here and maybe within the Jakarta community about that. So, not forgotten. Your point is valid. Emily.
yeah, so my question for Taban. So Taban, for example, we vote the current basically is the verbiage, voting verbiage, and we say okay, move this back to Jakarta and then basically release under MicroProfile. And then we this ballot passed and then Jakarta vote. Jakarta saying actually we want a MicroProfile. However, we don't really want to release MicroProfile under MicroProfile. Basically, it's directly is the kind of the do something which is against the will from MicroProfile. I guess at that point, MicroProfile, no, we disagree your vote. We are not going to move MicroProfile to Jakarta. We are happy on our own. Is that this is the kind of approach, or we just say, okay, you said you're going to move MicroProfile to Jakarta E, and then we will decide kind of whatever we want to do with it.
I'm not sure I followed the
So
last bit in particular, but okay.
okay, so
Yeah.
let me rephrase, give you a concrete example here. Okay, so we are voting in MicroProfile working group. We said, okay, we want basically Jakarta E to host a MicroProfile. However, release the MicroProfile spec under MicroProfile profile. This is kind of the whole proposal we put forward. And then the ballot passed successfully, for example. Yeah. So this is the step one. Do you follow me on this one?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Step two, you mentioned basically Jakarta E, and then we'll do a vote. You said, okay, we're happy to take a MicroProfile in. However, we don't want to release the MicroProfile and the MicroProfile. We want split all the MicroProfile into merge into the current Jakarta E kind of bucket. That's what they trying to do. And then that ballot passed successfully. However, these two ballots is completely different and contradict with each other. And then what will happen then? What's step 3? The 2 ballots all passed successfully, but they contradict with each other. So what's step 3?
That's a hypothetical that I think we should all work to avoid. So what I've been saying consistently in this context and also in other discussions that we've had with you and John is that I think you want to get to a resolution that is acceptable to the MicroProfile community that specifies the termination of the working group. That's entirely your call. And I think that's kind of an appropriate focus. You'll recall there was a suggestion that you would present your preferred outcome. So essentially the bullet points, not in a resolution, but you would present that to the Jakarta EE working group and get buy-in and alignment on that preferred outcome. But the resolution itself would not go down to the level that prescribes a solution that could even set up that hypothetical. The bottom line, and I just want to reiterate this very clearly, is that the MicroProfile resolution will not, I repeat, will not be binding on Jakarta EE. It's like the Jakarta EE working group having a resolution and thinking that it would be binding on MicroProfile. It's not fair. It's not according to any governance. They're separate working groups.
Yeah, and this is where I kind of figure things were going to go down is we have to come to an understanding or an agreement or agree to disagree. Well, no, I don't know if that one works, but beforehand, before the vote. Otherwise, we're going to be going ballot back and forth.
Yeah.
We see your ballot and raise you our ballot, right? That's not gonna be productive. So sorry,
Yeah.
There is a different way. There is a different way, and this is kind of what I think I'd send to you in an email, is that the resolution on the MicroProfile side would be to wind down, and then the resolution on the Jakarta side would similarly acknowledge and welcome the MicroProfile specifications into the purview of the working group without any specifics on the implementation details. The conversations would have to happen between the MicroProfile community and the Jakarta community as to how that implementation would happen. But it's a meeting of the minds as opposed to prescribing a solution that may or may not be acceptable to Jakarta. I mean, on the face of it, I don't know. In fact, some of us who sit on both sides of those working groups would have a better opinion on that topic. But that way you get resolutions that are acceptable to both parties, and it enables a collaborative discussion as to how the specs would be implemented as Jakarta EE specs.
Yeah, I'm a little wary about that approach because it delays the discussion after the ballot, and I think from a MicroProfile perspective, we kind of want to know what we're getting into, and I think it could be just as collaborative, either way, but one of them kind of has a collaboration up front versus after the fact. Because
So
I wouldn't want to have a ballot that winds things down before we know what's going to happen to a larger degree.
So John, I mean, the way to do that is kind of what probably we suggested about 6 weeks ago, or whenever that was, which is the bullet points, right? So the preferred implementation. So let's say the MicroProfile community coalesces on this. That is what you'll recall I suggested that you go over. It's in the minutes somewhere that you go over to the Jakarta EE steering committee and present that. Right, this is our vision for how the implementation will work, and then ideally you're getting nods and people saying, okay, yeah, I can see that being the outcome. But it's not forcing, well, in any event, there's just objectively, you cannot, it's not going to be binding to Jakarta EE. So that's
Understood. Yeah, I mean, we could do that.
That's still open to you, is having that, which I think is a version of what you're saying.
It's a version. I think that should be done regardless, that we should have kind of a steering committee to steering committee discussion. I think that's valid.
Exactly.
Yeah, before the vote, and I suspect everyone would agree with that. So now I see lots of hands up. So I'm gonna go with what I think is the order on the screen. So Jan.
Yeah, first of all, if we need to know why we want to merge the working groups. If we, or it would, from my perspective, and what I collected about the community feedback so far, the worst outcome if we merge the two working groups and then have all the differences inside a single working group with two sets of rules and namespaces, etc., logos, whatever. So we need to figure out what is worth to be kept inside Jakarta. And for this, we need to have a vote, maybe starting with a vote, starting negotiation, moving MicroProfile to Jakarta, to start that official process to approach to the steering committee of Jakarta, to merge in MicroProfile, working group content as a whole, and then for get some idea what might be points that need to be discussed first on our side is what are the options to each specific bullet point you identified. For example, the namespace, keeping the brand, etc. There we need to collect all the potential options, discuss them, and then have a vote what we think, with having in mind if we decide to merge into the Jakarta working group, all of this is not binding. It's just a suggestion we present to the Jakarta Steering Committee.
Yeah, so this is the kind of the reasoning, right? The catalyst. So you were mentioning that up front. We should have an idea. That's what this slide is intended to be. But Reza?
John, so again, I'm trying my best to try to move this forward in a meaningful way, but maybe this is not necessarily for you, but the rest of the folks on the call, if we pretty much, most of us are in the Jakarta steering committee also, right? So, I mean, we could just state our positions here. I would hope that it's a very similar situation to Microsoft, is that the vote is the vote, right? The opinion is the opinion. It won't change contextually. So, I mean, in a way, maybe this is not that big of an issue as long as we're upfront about communicating what our respective positions are. So it will be known what the vote outcome would be in the first place, right? So there is no guessing game. Really, I don't think it's needed, right? I hope nobody's unclear about what the Microsoft position is, for example, right? The other thing, John, going back to your proposal, and this is a nitty-gritty, I'll admit that, and I'll keep this minimal so we can move on and make progress. Some of these things, John, like I know it's contradictory to what I said earlier, but again, it seems like we're stating things that are maybe not needed, right? For example, I'm unclear why we need to say MicroProfile will have an independent release cycle if it's a Jakarta E profile in whatever shape or form that takes. That happens already, right? You can already do a independent release of profiles. So that's not really a big problem for me. Where the repo is going to land, it's all under Jakarta E ultimately, right? Each spec has its own project space. Whether what it's going to be called, that's a different story. It could be like MicroProfile Jakarta or whatever the name is, but it's basically again following the normal patterns of how things work in Jakarta when a new spec is introduced. And I don't think there's really a need to specify this beyond saying that we actually do have an opinion on what the spec name should be. That's something that I should, if that's our actual intent, I think we should just state that. Similarly, like, moving committers over, I don't know that as a working group, Jakarta would be able to make special accommodations. I think we will ultimately just follow the same committer process as always, right? So whatever the new respective projects are, whoever the candidate committers are for that project, they'll go through a committer election process just as they normally would. I don't know that all of these really are big enough issues to be voting on or bothering mentioning right now. So I think I would much rather have an unambiguous position on what the key issues are rather than sort of adding a bunch of stuff that maybe doesn't actually matter. So let me stop there. Again, like this is a minor point. The major point I wanted to really make is I don't think we need to guess. Like we know what the positions, respective positions are, and how the votes will probably play out as long as everybody is upfront about stating their opinions.
Let me quickly jump in before Ed to address the Rather's question there. I think for committer, I think it makes sense to be there because this is a kind of not a brand new specs, it's existing specs, and then it's because the current MicroProfile committers associated with all of the MicroProfile kind of the specs. So for that, I think it's kind of when the spec moved, so the committer list need to be make sure is moved over. It's not like you have to re-elect committers. I think is probably this will won't work out well. I think that can be addressed. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, I think Ed next.
Ed, go ahead.
So kind of along the lines of what Jan was saying, all of those things you had in context, I think maybe not all, but at least some of them, you could improve the resolution by adding whereas clauses to actually state those here, right? So that would help give some context to why are we proposing this now? Well, what is the perceived set of issues or problems that has brought this to a head? Why are we proposing it? And I guess what I heard Tabang saying is we're really proposing to wind down. This. It seems like this resolution is the ultimate goal of this is to wind down MicroProfile as an independent specification body and to have it become part of Jakarta EE. At least that's what it seems like we're discussing here. So we probably should state that clearly in the resolution.
Yeah, it's good feedback, Ed and Jan. I think it's very good feedback.
But anyway, adding some whereas clauses would help sort of set the stage for why this resolution is, why are we proposing what we're proposing here? These are the problems we're trying to solve.
Yeah, I agree. That's very good feedback. So the one thing that's a big kind of sticking point that I would like to know ahead of time meaning before a resolution, is the namespace issue, right? We could do, I could go back and look at all the, stances and where the votes would probably land. There's preferences, but are these red lines, right? Okay, I prefer it stays the same or it changes, but it's not going to change my vote. And then there's going to be, I want this to happen or I'm going to vote -1, right? I would kind of like to have an understanding of where that one is because it's such a big impact on customers, right? Regardless of how we operate, it's going to, force change on customers. So, that's the one thing where it's going to have more impact than the branding, right? Microspace profile versus MicroProfile or whatever, right? So I think from that perspective, um, I'd like to have a better feel for where that is going to land before we actually go to ballot. Reza?
So in the spirit of what I was saying before, John, I would just like to be very clear about what the Microsoft position on this is, and I hope that'll encourage others to do the same thing, or maybe at least make our position very, very clear. So we definitely, our topmost priority is we definitely do want to see this happen, because, honestly, continuing these two working groups has been a very big headache in many different ways, and we just want this headache to go away. I think it's going to be to everyone's benefit. So I think there is no red line for us, right? We want to see this happen, right? Whatever it takes, I think it's going to be a good thing in the end. There are reddish lines, right? So we don't want to end up in a situation where we got rid of a potentially redundant working group, yay for us, but we wind up with some of the same side effect problems that we've been dealing with for a long time. So in an ideal situation, we really do want whatever is the technology that is being developed under MicroProfile to look more or less exactly the way it would look like if these had been developed in Jakarta from the start, including the naming, the namespace, the branding, etc., all of those issues. And that is the ideal outcome for us. And if we are going to use our voting power to that end, right, John, to be completely transparent, right? So if there is a option for us to vote, we are going to, and there's a plausible possibility that our opinion actually is the winning vote, we're obviously not going to back away from that. Right? That's going to remain our position. If we determine that we are becoming a blocker to progress, only then really would we consider changing our position. So a less than ideal outcome would be, retaining Jakarta.microprofile, which is, I think, an easy compromise. We could easily do that. I don't think it's going to hurt anything too much. Naming things, so MicroProfile, no word, no space as a profile name. Yeah, it's a little bit awkward, but it could be dealt with. Retaining the branding altogether on top of that, it's again creating confusion. Keeping the namespace exactly org.microprofile, that again is creating confusion. So for us, it's a sliding scale of how much problems do we need to continue to want to deal with as opposed to just solving what we perceive to be the real problems here. So I hope it was as clear as mud, right? But at least, we're being transparent.
A couple of things I would add, and sorry I couldn't ever find out how to raise my hand, is that we should include in the resolution when we intend to wind down the spec, which is I think after the 7.1 release, so that's clear. And then I see that there's a bullet in there that says we were going to move over everything as is, which I like, and I think that pretty much implies that the namespace is going over as it is, and then Jakarta would decide on the other side what to do with it. So I don't really see why we need to include anything about what the namespace is going to be, other than just having the as is statement.
Well, go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. So it's kind of we kind of move. For example, we say okay, now we move over to Jakarta as it is, and then it's basically same namespace. And then kind of the Jakarta basically once it become a Jakarta spec, Jakarta will have the every right to change the namespace. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think the voting is a time statement. Maybe the vote now is kind of the in MicroProfile, we say keep the namespace. In Jakarta land, we said not mentioning any namespace, but later on they can have the freedom either to change the namespace or keep their namespace. This is yeah. So I don't know how to bind this kind of the duration of the vote and etc. But anyway, that's my kind of the thinking. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the winding down being in the ballot, like when, because it may not pass, right? Based on some of these points that we're talking about. It's why I kind of want to have the namespace discussion up front, and get into a little bit of, a little bit of discussion, lively discussion, we'll say, about that one. And for some it may be a red line, for some it may not. And I'm not even sure where people will stand in terms of red lines or not. We all, again, this is all under good intentions. So there's no animosity being felt, by myself, right? It's just there's a different perspective. Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, that I would agree. We need to have this discussion, and in the best case, we would do that on the MicroProfile working group mailing list in an official and structured way. Maybe just saying, yeah, in general, we want to merge the working group. Maybe then you can list your personal pain points or issues you would see, or what you would accept. And then we go to the things like the critical ones, having a discussion about the namespace change, for example, in a separate discussion, and getting a feedback from everybody written down. Yeah, I want to have it, I don't care, or I want to keep it as it is, for example, with these three options, and maybe adding a comment why or why not, or why not care about that point. And then we get a notion which is the position of every party, and we can assume maybe, yeah, a ballot merging the working group would pass or would not pass if there are too much blockers to prevent the merge happening.
Okay, I like the idea of having it in the MicroProfile working group email, just kind of saying, preference, is it, is it a red line? Would it, will you vote one or -1? If it were to be a ballot, right? This is more of a survey, right? An open discussion. Would this be a red line where you would vote, a -1 on a merging proposal? So I like that
On
idea.
that mailing
having
list,
the out of band
we can
discussion.
archive the results, so that is written down forever. So if there are questions in the past, the position is clear why that decision was made at that point, for example.
Reza?
Hearkening, so I think I'm just plus-minning what you and Jan are saying, but let me just make sure. This is going back to sort of my JCP experience, John, when there were particularly contentious issues. One of the strategies we used is just to use a straw poll, meaning a non-binding vote, right? So I'm wondering if one way of figuring this out is like taking the key issues, right? Not maybe the obvious one we don't even have a straw man on is, are we merging or not, or however we want to phrase that, host MicroProfile in Jakarta. Maybe we don't have a straw man vote on that one, but maybe we have a straw man vote on, the issues that we think are critical, quote unquote, contentious, like the namespace, the name of the specs. And there's a few of those. Maybe if we could just have a straw poll on those amongst the actual working group voting members, That would also clarify positions, wouldn't it?
Yeah. The question is, do we do it in discussion form in the email alias, or do we do it as like a Survey Monkey straw poll? Yeah,
I
that's
think,
basically what we are talking about. So I agree with you,
yeah.
Lisa.
Yeah,
Emily?
I think survey probably will prefer Survey Monkey. Anyway, non-binding and etc. Without a Survey Monkey can pretty much list basically the company names and etc. And then it's pretty much express your opinion, like yes, no, and etc.
And
I'm
whether or not
sure
it's a
save
red
you
line.
time and effort, John. Like it's just a small handful of votes. Do we need Survey Monkey for this? Anyway, I'm okay.
Well, that's I mean, that's the question, right? Is it because you know, if we have it, and Jan, I'll get you in just a second. You know that if we have the discussion in email form, you know what I liked, what we did in some of our votes or ballots that we've done in MicroProfile in the past is we would have a vote thread and a discussion thread, right, at the same time, so people could talk about why they vote the way they want in the discussion thread, and then the vote thread is literally +1, -1. Maybe one sentence of clarification, and that's it. And so that way, it's a whole lot easier to tally, right? To your point. So we could do it that way because it's worked very successfully in the past. Jan?
Yeah, I would agree. I would do it on the mailing list because then it's recorded, and we don't have a tool, and somebody needs to take care that the results of the tools are merged into an official communication channel that is kept for historical research on some decisions. So not using another tool, giving the freedom to add content and background for that decision in a written form. There we can easily collect the results and
Yeah, I think we spend too much details about execution. It's depend on who will take action, and then choose the method is kind of makes more sense. And eventually, for the recording purpose, eventually the summarize will just summarize everything that will be kept. So yeah, whoever takes the action, just like do whatever they feel most comfortable with. And at the end of the day, the main goal is to collect the people's feedback.
So I will start that thread tomorrow. I'm taking PTO after this call is over. I gotta use it or lose it in terms of my PTO hours. I bumped up to my max. So tomorrow I will start a discussion thread and then follow that up with an actual vote thread.
Can I just interject
One.
that the straw poll doesn't bind you, right? So
No,
you
agreed.
may,
Yeah.
you may say yes, yes, no, no, but then when the final resolution comes out, one may decide, well, I'm summing all this up, I'll vote some way differently, right?
Agreed 100%.
Yeah.
One last
So
thing. One last thing, John, and I really, I want to keep this very, very brief. I think in this case, ranked choice voting might help. Yeah, something to think about.
Okay.
what choice? Sorry.
Ranked choice voting, Emily. So
Oh,
what's your first,
ranked.
what's your
Okay.
first preference, second preference, etc.
So here is the kind of we need to make it very clear. So John, when you said voting, you meant a straw poll, right? No voting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So when we do the kind of the thread, etc., just a straw poll, and then so this is one thing. The other thing is basically is with all the feedback and etc., and then kind of we agree among ourselves, and then if we come up with the similar things as John you presented earlier, and then we can run past the Jakarta steering committee. So basically, before we say the next step, so Taban, do you think if we interlock with Jakarta, so is that a steering committee we need to interlock or some other spec committee?
I would start with the steering committee.
Okay, Okay,
And
great.
just to be clear
That's
what
what I
the
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to
Yeah.
be clear what the interlock would be, maybe I missed that, but I think what I heard where the discussion was headed was that on the basis of a straw poll that is conducted among MicroProfile members, you'd come up with a preferred, let's say, implementation path.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
would be the basis of, you put that into 1 or 2 slides, and that's kind of what you would say, hey, we are on the MicroProfile side, we are considering a resolution to wind down the working group. We have a preferred implementation around how that transition would happen and how the specifications would be absorbed and integrated into Jakarta EE. We'd like to discuss that with you and get their feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
on the basis of that conversation, that's where people will say, well, no, this is something that needs to be discussed with platform or whatever the case may be. But that way you're able to get that pre-validation that hopefully will allay and address some of the concerns that have been voiced here, while still having a resolution that doesn't set up that kind of that hypothetical situation that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I suspect there's going to be a couple of straw polls. The namespace is one. The branding is probably the other. And that might actually be it, because I think those are the two that we just need clarification on. So I'm gonna kind of pause this topic because we have 5 minutes left. And as Emily, is there anything that you wanted to bring up as it regards to the tutorial?
No, for yeah, quickly. For tutorial is pretty much all the chapter is being completed by Turan, and the only 2 left behind is basically the demo code. The basically is sample code, and also the infrastructure and etc. So that's kind of, hopefully that can be done in the next couple weeks. That's pretty much done. So right now, if you go to the MicroProfile tutorial GitHub repo, so you can see the whole chapter. If you missed any review cycle, you like before, you can log on to read the chapters to see whether you have any comments and etc. If you do, feel free to raise the issue, and we need to just make a turn to address them. That's all.
Thanks, Emily. And just a word to everyone here. I really appreciate the help and the discussion that we've had today. It really helps me out. Helps to keep the ball moving forward. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone on the call.
Yeah. Also, thanks to you, John, and thanks to everybody for your patience. So this is kind of, yeah, it will take time.
Okay. I'm gonna just go ahead and end the call here and look out for the MicroProfile working group earliest tomorrow about having a straw poll on the namespace. Okay.
Great. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you. Bye bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.